Well, Stu, good afternoon. Welcome back.
Well, let me get right into it. It's not a good afternoon. There's so much stuff going on in the world and in New York City and in Washington. It's painful, actually.
Really, I've been enjoying the sweet smell of flowers as they emerge.
I don't believe it. I don't believe it.
Well, you know me too well. You really do. And, even if that were true, which it is kind of, the weather has got nicer, I'd still find the dark side in all of that. But on that note, why don't we start off? I know Stu, I think because he lived in California, that's what I'm thinking. He has like an environmentalist. He's not a zealot. Like, he isn't like sitting on trees and took the trees so they won't chop them down. But I think Stu's a little bit of an environmentalist.
I think I am in a number of ways. And I think we need to be on the preservation side for the sake of our children and future generations and our planet. And we have to be mindful of what we're doing to nature, in nature. One example of, though, this horrible situation with the Trump administration, he appointed a guy named Lee Zeldin who didn't have any particular environmental interest or capability, but he then put in Trump and his minions put in a lot of lobbyists for oil, gas, and chemical other interests in senior positions within the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. But 2 days ago, Zeldin came out with something that's simply horrifying. He came out, he wants to restate the agency's mission. I thought it was pretty well stated before broadly, but there. And he said it is to, quote, lower the cost of buying a car, heating a home, and running a business, unquote. Now, I might be in favor of a lot of those things, but it's not at the expense of environmental protection. He wants to repeal the limits on pollution from tailpipes and smokestacks, smokestacks being a tremendously harmful committer of environmental danger. He wants to eliminate protection for wetlands. Well, that's an important thing as well for so many reasons. I don't want to go into them now. And then he wants to eliminate the legal basis for allowing the agency to regulate gases that are heating our planet. I laugh, but it's frightening. And all I can say is I hope the NRDC, Natural Resources Defense Council, Environmental Defense Fund, and other well-meaning individuals and organizations go to the courts, as they had to do during Trump's first administration, and try and stop or slow down this essentially stab in the heart of the Environmental Protection Agency.
Well, it's kind of interesting that a government that claims they're trying to make the government more efficient and that they're trying to pare down its role, that the EPA is now being used as a device to expand business opportunities. Mm-hmm. It makes no sense, and it's not the mission of the EPA. But look what we're talking about. And truthfully, we do know under the left-wing Biden assault on our freedoms, which is a different kind of assault that occurred, they used environmentalism to go too far, one of which was, that these electric car mandates and all the rest of it, and it went too far. Now we're seeing just the opposite. And it seems that we got bad and now we're getting worse. So, but it's unhealthy. It's sick. It's not a good statement on our society.
And it'll get up to the Supreme Court. These guys are going to get it there on what one can do to a congressionally established commission or agency,
right, and
what the president can do and all.
Well, what's funny is one of the Supreme Court justices who Trump appointed, Amy Coney Barrett. Yeah, something like
Coney, yeah.
She has become less of a, reliable right-wing vote. And as a consequence, the MAGA crazies are like threatening her and going after her. And it's like, this is who your friend Trump appointed. It seems to me that I don't understand why we think it's a good idea to allow thugs to threaten public officials. But, look who we're talking. This is a guy who pardoned some of the Proud Boys.
And continues, that's a whole other issue, but he's continuing to issue pardons to convicted individuals who happen to like him. That's going on. It never has been something that goes on perpetually during the administration. It's something that's been reserved for the tail end. He's turning it into not a daily event, but in every weekly or that kind of event.
Not to sound gross or crude, Stu, but anyone who sucks his dick can get a pardon, apparently, including Ron Blog, whatever.
That guy, Blogovich or something.
A crackpot criminal who should have been locked away. He already got clemency. Now and then he's being appointed as the ambassador to Serbia. Now, if those repulsive toadies in the Senate allow that, they
will.
They should all be burned at the stake, frankly. This guy isn't even a Republican. He's a Democrat. But, Stu, when I go back in history and I look at iconic presidential moments, things that will define a president as great, we can look to Washington's farewell address, which was one of the greatest political speeches ever given. Now, the Gettysburg Address, Lincoln wrote it on the train up to Gettysburg.
Back of an envelope, right?
Right. It encapsulated his entire justification for the Civil War. It is engraved in his monument, which he deserves, in Washington, D.C. It's a beautiful monument. And it only lasted 15 minutes, this speech, yet still resonates even today when you read those words. Now, Trump gave a speech last week that lasted 100 minutes, and all it did was troll the Democrats, exploit some cancer patients, and filled with garbage and lies. It was an embarrassment, but the Democrats' reaction was also embarrassing. Now, in addition, we also can recall FDR's fireside chats during the Great Depression, which eased the tensions of a very difficult period in our history.
Can you even remember that period? I cannot, where there was no internet and no television.
Well, I wasn't alive.
I wasn't either. But they had to listen to radios, right?
They listened to radios, and the guy was reassuring a very stressed out nation.
Yes.
And then, of course, we know more recently we had Reagan, who gave a speech right in front of the Berlin Wall, calling for it to be torn down.
Yeah, Mr. Gorbachev.
And then he also gave a speech in Normandy commemorating those who fought that heroic battle. These are presidential moments that we relish. Well, last week, a few days ago, out in front of the White House with his autistic baby daddy butt buddy, Trump had a bunch of Teslas displayed up in front of our White House.
A plug.
And it was hawking them because Elon Musk, as we know, has generated a lot of negative publicity for himself. He's a polarizing personality. It's now being exposed to the light of day. And his company, Tesla, is suffering, and the stock value is plummeting, and people are boycotting the product, because and it's rather ironic that a guy who's gutting the EPA is now trying to hawk electric cars. By the way, there are well-made electric cars, and then there's the Tesla. The Tesla is not a well-made car. I had the misfortune of I rented a car once, and that was the only car they had left. First of all, it's just awkward to use. It's impossible to use. Second of all, as it ages, they don't maintain quality, and they're not like a Mercedes, that's for sure. 3, if you want to charge it, good luck trying to find a charging station. And if you do find one, it will take you 30 to 40 minutes to charge it, which is a waste of anyone's time. Over the summer, someone ran out of battery power, got stuck in the car, and it was almost died from heat because it was in the middle of the summer, because she couldn't figure out how to escape from the car. And apparently there is an emergency escape hatch from the vehicle.
Like
a spaceship. Now, I don't know about when you drive a regular car and it runs out of gas, you open the door and get out. So I don't have a lot of sympathy for poor Elon.
But poor Elon is supposed to be rescuing the 2 people in the space station now.
Good, maybe not. We'll see. And if he does, we'll give him some credit.
I mean, my fingers are crossed because they've had a couple of incidents off the landing pad in the last week.
But another thing that's funny is Trump was claiming that it's illegal to boycott Tesla. Now, it's not illegal, and his car sucks anyway. I didn't need a boycott. I would never buy one in the first place. It's a terrible, terrible product. And the negative press he's getting, he's also been mocked pretty brutally on Saturday Night Live. And it's actually, the Mike Myers has been playing him using his Dr. Evil character.
I haven't seen it.
And it's kind of funny. It's amusing and shows all his weird, jerky mannerisms and all the rest of it. And do you know the White House is unhappy that they're mocking him? Now, why would you even pay attention to Saturday Night Live? And if you don't want to be mocked and criticized, don't be a douche, because that's what he is, right? And then...
But we're not supposed to be the sales agent for. We shouldn't be hawking cars of other...
For this poor guy who doesn't have enough money as it is. You know, don't be an asshole. People won't pay attention to you.
It's not a used car lot. That's what it sounds like when you say there are these vehicles
in front of the White House.
Yeah.
And what's even more funny about this, his mission to make the government more efficient, no one would criticize that. But he has not made the government more efficient. He's just made a spectacle of himself. And as we noted last week, Doge claims $100 billion in saving, which is a drop in the bucket, frankly. But in truth, when you go to the outside experts, conservative groups, no more than $10 billion. This is a complete charade. And then this all blew up also last week because little Marco and Musk got into a huge scratch and drag out fight in the Oval Office because Musk came storming in and accused him of not firing enough people. And then they got into it. And then Sean Duffy got involved and said, I had to hire back the air traffic controls or prevent the firing of air traffic controllers because we have plane crashes we have to deal with. Musk denies all of this, which isn't true because the guy is a pathological liar.
You know that a lot of this began, I felt very strongly right at the outset, you know, efficiency is great and there's got to be a lot of waste in government and go forth, but you had to go about it in a reasonable way. You had to insert people who evaluate the situation and decide where the waste is coming from and what people could be reassigned or eliminated.
Not him.
Not this way. You don't fire first and evaluate later.
No, and also, I don't think he's qualified to handle this job. Who is he? I hear all these people talk about how brilliant he is, but I've never seen his IQ test. I don't believe he's all that brilliant. Sure, he's not stupid. He's smart. He's been successful, but he is not Albert Einstein. He hasn't created his products. It is the engineers he has hired. I hate to tell you, his brilliance is highly overrated. And if we were actually saw his IQ, it's probably no better than the average Joe billionaire, right? But
no, well, I'll disagree, but I'll leave it go for that.
I don't know where you get your information.
I don't have particular, except some of the institutions he's created in the car and his
the car
and SpaceX. Come on, this is a guy.
He didn't create it. The people who work for him.
Brilliance involves getting the right people to do the right things, but I'm sure he has some say in what goes on. Well, I don't think we ought to deflect this.
No, but I'm just going to point out.
I think there are emotional weaknesses and other things going on.
He's the type of guy, Stu, who, when he was a kid, they put a helmet on him and sent him to school with a special yellow bus. I don't want him in my country. First of all, he's not even an American. He's a South African. He's a migrant. He doesn't belong here. And I hope the next time the libtards take over, they take away his citizenship. But now when you hear the next thing he did, Stu, you are not going to be pleased because Mark Kelly is a Democrat senator from Arizona.
Yeah.
Okay.
The husband of the lady who got shot.
Right. He is highly a flame-throwing left-winger. He's middle-of-the-road Democrat.
An astronaut.
Right. And he also flew 39 combat missions in the military in Operation Desert Storm in 1991. So this is kind of a decorated guy. He was considered to be vice president. Of course, Kamala, that dumb moron, chose that idiot.
Right. He was one of those, wasn't he?
Right. Yeah. He was too normal. Instead, she chose Tampon Tim. Well, Mark Kelly went to Ukraine. He came back. He expressed support for Ukraine and criticized Trump's treatment of Ukraine on Twitter. Not the most inflammatory thing. It was just his opinion, right? Well, the autistic baby daddy, who never flew 39 combat missions, never did a thing in the military, called him a traitor.
Oh, that's absurd. That's just horrifying.
Imagine this multi-billion trolling a United States senator who's a real American, unlike this parasite. He is a parasite.
Traitor. That's just horrible.
And who's the real traitor? Elon Musk moved out of South Africa to Canada, obtained a Canadian citizenship. One of the reasons was to avoid conscription into the South African military.
Is that the truth?
Absolutely. It's not the only reason, but it was one of the reasons. So this draft dodging, yellow-bellied, non-American parasitic migrant has the nerve to attack an American war hero? It's disgusting.
Avoiding the draft then seems to be something that he has in common
With big fat Trump?
Yes.
It's just,
I mean,
I guess they have a lot in common. As a matter of fact, this is even one of his more weirder statements. He said, I love Donald Trump as much as a straight man could love another man. I mean,
wait a minute. I don't mind.
can you even envision the two of them? What is he going to make Trump pregnant? 15th?
I like that kind of honest admission of affection, but falling short of that other kind of sexual conduct. I'm sorry. I think it's kind of interesting.
It's interesting. It's creepy. It's disgusting. Now let's go on to even more. Now, we're now getting to the point where Doge is not finding $1 trillion by firing federal workers and like closing down some no-name agency.
Judges force him to come back.
Right, exactly. So during Trump's 100-minute bullshit speech, he mentioned how there are millions of people over 100 collecting Social Security, and it's filled with fraud and abuse. Well, in fact, Stu,
can't imagine it's millions.
There are only 89,000 people over 99 who are collecting benefits. Now, that could be a real number. It may not be.
I even think it sounds high, but wow.
Right, exactly.
But wow.
Well, on the Joe Rogan podcast, the autistic baby daddy.
Oh, you got to stop yourself from what you're watching and listening.
Well, he claims that Social Security is a Ponzi scheme. Now, Bernard Madoff ran a Ponzi scheme, which is where you promise high returns, collect new investors, and then pay off the old ones with the others' money, and they ultimately collapse. Now, Social Security has been in existence since 1935, approximately. It's not exactly a Ponzi scheme. What it is it hasn't been funded properly.
Correct.
And that's a big difference. It needs changes. But to call it a Ponzi scheme is a little bit weird and disturbing. And it also shows where his thinking is going, because he's now realizing if you really want to cut $1 trillion out of the deficit, it's not going to be, from closing down U.S. aid. It's going to be going after entitlements. Now, recently, he had an interview on MSNBC, and he said that both Social Security and Medicare need to be eliminated, Stu.
This was Musk.
Yeah.
I can't believe that. I mean,
right.
And I don't care to hear from him on the subject.
Right, neither do I. He's not a real American. He doesn't have a right to opine on our systems. He is a parasite. He does not belong here, and he certainly doesn't belong in our government. And by the way, I want to reiterate the libtards, don't buy one of those shitty cars because they suck anyway. I mean, can you imagine going after a war hero when you're a draft dodger?
And that's the second time I think of Arizona, because it was Trump who said that John McCain was not a hero.
Well, that's true.
There were two from Arizona. I mean, those two are in the same category. Now, I know McCain certainly had a more difficult time with about 6 to 7 years in prison camp, but Kelly has been a hero in our space movement and performing in combat.
I would agree. I don't think these are the kind of comments you'd expect from someone who wants to be taken seriously as to bring efficiency to the government. It just sounds like an internet troll who spends too much time gaming and masturbating with his 20-year-old friends. I mean, seriously, this guy is in his 50s and he's behaving like this. He should be sent back to Canada.
I get it.
And I don't want Canada as a state either. I'd like them to remain separate. So he needs to go along with that terrorist supporter. What's his name? Mohammed Khalid?
Well,
yeah,
it's another matter.
All right. I finished on my musking, so to speak.
Well, can I move on to this Trump stuff that's occurred today in Trump Towers?
So I am permitting it. You're
okay, good show. Look, they've a bunch of people, I don't know, several hundred, I would guess, from looking at something on the tube, were in the lobby, and how they had gotten in without going through some metal detector or the like. I don't think it exists anymore, but how they got in is another question. But they had signs and they were protesting and screaming for the release of this guy, Khalil. I'm not going to talk about that because I don't feel comfortable enough about knowing all the facts about Khalil. But what I do feel, there's an issue here that bothers me, and it's the growing use of masks to avoid visual identification. Now, and of course, some are going to stand up and say, well, that's a free speech thing. Well, when you're talking about using it for a religious purpose or for a medical purpose, when you're trying to avoid a transmission of something or receipt of something, fully understandable. But we started to see during COVID, with some of the Black Lives Matter stuff going on, people using it just to avoid visual detection for some of their aggressive actions on the streets. And then we saw it even more colorfully. I don't mean anything by that, but more aggressively when some biker types were using masks to hide their face. They'd stop with a bike, rob a store, and head off quickly. So we've seen a progression of the use of masks. This morning I saw it and I was looking at it and I was saying, oh, and of course it found its way to Barnard and some other schools in Columbia. It's been a growing phenomenon, not a matter of medical need, not a matter of religious need, but a device to avoid detection when committing, in some cases, criminal acts.
And anti-Semitic attacks.
Yes,
students.
And it which itself may be a crime. I'm not sure, but certainly taking over buildings and avoiding detection, and now taking over the trespassing this morning. So let me just tell you what's happening. Because of what I just said, there's some ferment going on with respect to masks and mask legislation. One of them, Hochul, incidentally, recently said, this is 2025, she was open to considering legislation providing for enhanced penalties where a mask was used during the commission of a crime. I think that's a clever way, a good way of addressing some of this without saying you can't ever wear masks in public, which would this and that, but during the commission of a crime. Second, a new bill was introduced in the legislature making, again in 2025, so this isn't just old stuff, a misdemeanor to wear a mask for the primary purpose of menacing or threatening violence against another person. So there are these competing views, and I think Hochul, was reacting to that broader thing, which has questions of intent and difficulty of proving intent. And finally, though, there's an interesting character that comes up, and I think I've spoken of her maybe once before, Maud Maron. You know that character?
Yes.
Well, I know she's interesting. You've got lots of things about thoughts on her, and she has a history as being a public defender. She's a Barnard grad, but she's come out and said, oh, by the way, she's now running against Alvin Bragg.
Good.
And she could change parties to do that, to go Republican. And I think she could be competition. Anything could be competition for people who want to see a little more crime. Yeah, a little more prosecutor activity.
Who actually does the job. Yes.
And so she said, Barnard students and college students everywhere in America deserve to go to class without masked, violent, terrorist, sympathizing, disrupting class, hurting people, and abusing the enormous privilege of college life. I think she's on the money with this stuff that just generally says you can't come here and call a halt to university process. And even if you're not hitting someone, but you are threatening them or taking over rooms and threatening people and trespassing. I think she's on the right track there. But anyway, I wanted to just say, I think this masking thing is beginning to gain a little traction. It'll be fought for by all the lefters on the city council and by those in the state legislature, but it's gaining a little traction. And well, I'm in favor of seeing some way of addressing it.
Well, frankly, I don't really believe they have a First Amendment right to say what they believe. They don't have a First Amendment right to put a mask on because they're cowards and don't want to be recognized, because what they're worried about is that some investment bank or consulting firm is going to identify them and not hire them.
But being a coward doesn't mean they're violating the law.
Well,
they don't lose their right to free speech.
They can say whatever they want, but wearing a mask just goes to show.
It shows cowardly.
It shows what spineless little
creatures
they are. And as far as that guy who's getting himself may get deported. He is a green card holder. He isn't an American citizen. And he came here to foment terror on the Columbia campus where Jewish students had been prevented from going to class. Now, first of all, he's just stupid. If you want to stay in America, I don't think I'd be engaging in bigotry. Number one. Number two, it's an entitlement mentality. You think you can come here as not even an American and claim our privileges and harass our students?
I like your attitude.
Fuck him, frankly. His wife is pregnant and she's 8 months pregnant. She's an American and the father is being ripped away from her and put in detention. Well, this is what happens when you are an asshole. So, and I don't know if what Trump's doing is legal or not, but
well, isn't it the Secretary of State? Did I read the Secretary of State can say someone's a terrorist and he has the right to.
Right. That's what I heard little Marco. Yes. And I mean, Marco is a credible person.
I believe he is.
He's not hawking Teslas in front of the White House. Now, so yeah, I mean, the mass thing, these protesters, I've had enough of them. And frankly, they are not just expressing free speech. They are engaging in anti-Semitic conduct. They are not peaceful and they are disrupting.
And they're often trespassing. We don't know how many of the masked invaders are actually students or actually lawfully in the United States.
Good question. And I've always suspected they're being funded by Iran and outside interests who want to foment dissension.
It would be a nice expenditure of funds from their perspective.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and if anything, they've been unsuccessful because they're so annoying, but that's another issue. So in a way, we're kind of praising what Trump is doing.
I have no problem. I certainly despise Trump in many ways and overall, but there's no question from my perspective, there's no question that there are certain ways in which I agree with him. I want strong border activity. I want the bastards to come in when invited. And second, in terms of crime and punishment and law and order, I'm on his side. I think we need it because otherwise you have chaos.
And we don't need Middle Eastern Jew haters here either. We have enough problems as it is. Go back where you came from. And speaking of another thing I would say I appreciated that Donald Trump did, which is one of the first things he did was he signed an executive order and he eliminated DEI from all federal programs. And I think that was a good thing because DEI was divisive, it was ineffective, and it was just another way the left could use cancel culture to stifle people they don't like.
Yeah, I have a certain attraction to that as well.
Right. But now it's like everything in the Trump world, it's gone too far. The skirt-chasing Fox News talking head who sexually assaulted women and while spouting the Bible, Pete Hegseth, has taken it upon himself to enforce this DEI initiative at the Pentagon, again, flagging about 26,000 images and posts in the Pentagon, one of which was an image of Enola Gay. Not gay as in homosexual, the B-29 bomber that was used to drop the first atomic bomb over Hiroshima.
What does he want to do?
He wants to get rid of it.
Oh, he must not know what he's saying there. That must be a mistake.
Well,
I mean,
I think they saw the word gay.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Which just goes to show how stupid
that really is stupid. I mean,
right.
That also shows.
By the way, Enola Gay was the mother of the pilot, Paul Tibbets. In addition to the Enola Gay getting flagged as potential.
I love that. That's just priceless.
They were also trying to eliminate images of the Tuskegee experiment. I guess because it mentioned black. Now, we're not allowed to say black anymore either, according to...
I'm sorry, the Tuskegee experiment is an important part of, and a sad part of American history.
Isn't this what the Stalinists did in the Nazis? They tried to wipe away and eliminate negative parts of their history. I mean, if you visited Auschwitz before the collapse of the Soviet Union, the Soviets renamed it a work camp. And it was a work camp. They worked you to death. But they tried to mask what really went on there. And as time has gone on, it's been reimagined as what it was. And there are other scenarios similar to that. Now, in addition to this, though, Stu, bad enough that we have a Secretary of State who's just so dumb and so unacceptable. We have a U.S. attorney in Washington, D.C. by the name.
You meant Secretary of Defense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. I mean,
Yeah.
Ed Martin, though, who I'm talking about now, the U.S. attorney, he sent a letter to the dean of.
See the DC
U.S. attorney, yeah.
For DC?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He sent in a letter to Georgetown Law School's dean demanding all cessation of all DEI initiatives, and he warned that he was going to not hire any student from the school if they didn't eliminate them all. Now, first of all, a U.S. attorney is to enforce criminal laws. It's not to enforce an executive order. It's not illegal for a private Jesuit institution to have a DEI program if they want it. I mean, it's maybe ill-advised, but, And second of all...
And that's a serious law school. That's just another matter. You don't just go disqualifying students from those places.
Just because you don't like what the school
policy,
does?
Yes.
It's Nazi-esque, Stu. It's Nazi-esque. And what's also funny about Georgetown's dean basically rebuffed them and said, no, that's not too much.
I'd be kidding.
Yeah, they were like, you out of your mind. But I would say now we are using DEI and elimination of it as a way to threaten, harass, and bully people. We don't like academic institutions. And I think one of the first things the Nazis did was go after the academics.
You are so very thoughtful. You're usually way ahead of me. But I think you're right.
It's disgraceful. It's embarrassing. This is a constitutional democracy. This is not, you know what? Lincoln got a memorial. Jefferson got a memorial. George Washington has one. Reagan should have one. FDR has one. Donald Trump, like Adolf Hitler, is going to end up in a bunker with a bullet in his head from a self-inflicted injury, because when that justice is finally served, he won't be able to face it because he's a coward and a pig.
I'm afraid before that time, if that were ever to occur, and I'm not wishing it on him, he'll have private sources build a monument. They will. Oh, and that will precede his effort to have another term in office.
Well, you know what, Stu? If they want to build a monument to him, I think there's a landfill out in Staten Island for him, because that's where he belongs.
Maybe Trump Towers.
Which is also an ugly edifice of his bad taste.
Okay, kid, where do we go from here?
Well, why don't you conclude with a more uplifting story?
Well, this doesn't exactly qualify, but it's less aggressive. It's not politically based. Look, sometimes I wonder, after having seen some hockey games, how many times there have been prosecutions for assault and battery and the like. And I'll get back to that in a moment, but something occurred within the last few days in Lynchburg, Virginia, that raises the subject. There was a high school track meet, and during that meet, there was a relay race. It was the 4x200, meaning, 4 candidates from each school run 200-meter legs of a race, and they pass a baton. There were at least 3 teams in this race that I could tell from the video I'm now about to describe. During the course of this race, in the final, I'd say 150 yards, one of the competitors who had a baton in her hand hit a competitor in the back of the head intentionally. It's quite obvious from the video. Hit a competitor during the race, and that injured person struggled to get off the track and fell, and later was determined, it seems, to have a concussion. I mean, I've never seen such a thing. I've seen worse in hockey, of course, but I've never thought of such a thing in a competition among high schoolers or any others on a track. So she stumbles, and then the baton twirler has been charged with misdemeanors of assault and battery. And I saw nothing in the footage before that. You get to wonder what happened before things. Nothing in there suggested that there was any reason to hit someone over the head, in the back of the head, with a baton, and those aren't light. And so we'll see what comes of that. But it made me go back just for a moment and try to look at what has happened in hockey. There have been a number of instances where things have gone to trial for excessive, brutal stuff. Most of them in Canada, juries have found people not guilty in cases where you could easily have said guilt, but it's part of their ethos up there, that they think that's part of the game. And only one that I found recently, it was the year 2000, a Boston Bruin guy, a guy named Marty McSorley, and God bless the name of Sorley, slashed another guy in the head, and he got a 1-year suspension from hockey, which is important from their viewpoint. But he was also convicted of assault with a weapon. But there's a history of tolerance and belief that it's part of the game in Canada. And that's all I wanted to say.
Well, this is in Canada, and Canada will never be part of us. And
he also said that the chief guy said up there now said, and we'll always be better in hockey than you.
It's true, but hockey's a pretty violent sport.
Yes.
Track and field is not necessarily known for that.
Folks, look it up. It's a video online, Lynchburg, Virginia High School.
So someone clobbered someone over the head with the bottom.
Back of the head. Very obvious. No question. And was irritated by something the girl was trying to do before, but nothing that I saw allowed for that result. And certainly that's not self-defense.
This is just another example of a poorly raised, poor sportsmanlike child. And
I agree.
My question is, did you find out if it was one of Elon's 14 children?
No, it was a black girl. I don't think it was. And the other.
You don't know who he's screwing.
I know
there's so many people, but it's really disgraceful that
really is.
It's a high school sports game.
Right.
But look what this country has become. And on that note, Stu, we didn't really have a lot of sweetness in life.
Did I leave you with a lot of life? Not a lot of. That wasn't a light.
No, wasn't you. It wasn't the usual you. But it was, I think, the usual me, maybe a little more vitriolic than usual.
Oh, you were. But that's okay. That's you.
All right. Well, until next week.
Bye.